Let's take a look at how Silverlight finds resources. I'm thinking of things like images or WAV files or MP3 files or maybe some short videos, those kinds of things. And what I've got is a standard web project. It's referencing a Silverlight project, so really it's the results of file new project, which we do many times in these videos. I've started to work on the UI a little bit in that I have a border, and in that border I have an image. And at the moment the image doesn't have a source. So what I'm going to do first off is add into my Silverlight project. Let's go and add into this an existing item. It's from my desktop, and I'm going to go for this JPEG here called Embedded A1. Let's add that in, but I'm going to rename it here. I'm going to call it myimage.jpg, something like that. Now what's going to happen to that JPEG at build time? Well, if we look at the properties for it, you'll see that the build action is set to resource. So what that means, it will end up as an embedded resource inside the assembly called resource finding. So this thing will end up as a resource. Now how would we locate that using a path over here? Well, it's very natural. All we would do is myimage.jpg. It's as simple as that. If we go and run that, you can see that the actual image says embedded in assembly 1. So even in Visual Studio it seems to get it right, and if we press F5, then what will happen is we get our image embedded A1 on the screen. Okay, so that's cool. Now, what if we had another image in this client bin folder with the same name? Let's go and add an existing item to this from my desktop. And on my desktop, I've got this one here called webserver.jpg, which you can see, hopefully. Let's just move these to large icons, extra large icons here. Webserver.jpg actually contains the text web server, so we'll add that in over here, but let's rename it to be myimage.jpg. Okay, let's press F5. Which does Silverlight prefer? It prefers the image inside of its own assembly. Let's go and take that image out of the assembly. Let's exclude it from the project. Let's rebuild. Let's press F5. Let's see what happens at the point where we run this. Let's press F5. Still seems to be coming up with the wrong one. Let's rebuild. I don't feel good about what we just did. Let's rebuild the solution. Let's press F5. That's better. It's coming from the web server. So essentially what we just learned is that by preference, if we use a path like this one here, myimage.jpg, we will initially look for an embedded resource in the assembly we're being loaded from. And then we'll go and look back on the site of origin if we can't find one as an embedded resource. And obviously if we can't find either, then it's not going to work. So that's one thing we can do. Let's go and add that existing item again. So let's add, in fact, let's add a new existing item. So let's just go back to my desktop and we'll add a picture again. I'm going to use this one here with the text ZAP A1. So this one, what we're going to do with it is I'm going to check its build action to not be a resource. I don't want it inside my assembly. I want it inside my ZAP. We set this to be content. That means it won't be in the assembly, it will be in the ZAP. Consequently, as you can see at the moment with this myimage.jpg, let's make sure we rebuild everything just to be absolutely sure what we're doing. And, oh, silly me, let's go and rename this thing to be myimage.jpg. Oh, looks like we're going to have to tidy up a little bit. Let's get rid of the existing myimage.jpg and let's rename this to be myimage.jpg. And just to be clear, let's rebuild everything again just so we know what's going on. Okay, let's go press F5. It doesn't find the image. Notice that's quite interesting because we won't debug this. But notice it's quite interesting because Visual Studio thinks that this image is going to be displayed in here, but in fact it's not. And the reason for that is that this is using the wrong kind of path. If you want to load images from your ZAP, you need to include a leading slash. Let's press F5. See what happens at runtime. Hopefully we rebuilt everything. And you can see now we're loading this from the ZAP. So that's two places we can put resources within this project, either in the ZAP or inside the assembly inside the ZAP. It's a subtle distinction there. Now what happens again if we go back to our client bin up here and add an existing item? Let's go back to the desktop, let's add that web server bitmap, this one here, and once again let's rename that as myimage.jpg. Now which one is the application going to find? We run the application, it still goes ahead and finds the image inside the ZAP. What if we take away the image from the ZAP? Let's delete it from the ZAP. Let's go and rebuild everything just to be sure of what we're doing. Let's go and press F5 again. And once again we can see that we fall back. So in both cases, whether you've got your image in the ZAP or the image in the assembly in the ZAP, and whether you use a leading slash or not, either way we will fall back to look on the web server if we can't find the image in the preferred place, which would be either the ZAP or the assembly inside the ZAP. Now what if I want to load an image from another assembly? So let's take away all images, this one can go, and let's add into this solution a new project to be a Silverlight class library, which I'll call it resource assembly, something like that. Okay, we'll add that in, we'll take away all code from it because we don't need any code in it right now, and into that assembly let's add existing item, go to the desktop once again, let's look for an image. I'm going to take this one here called embedded A2, so let's take that, let's make sure that we rename it to myimage.jpg, and let's make sure that we embed this as an assembly. So we'll go in and we're going to say resource, which means embedded into that assembly. Now we want to put this resource assembly into the same ZAP as resource finding. So what we'll do is add a reference from resource finding to resource assembly. So now we have a reference from here to there. What we now need to do is change this URI so that we pick up this image that's embedded into this resource assembly that ends up into this ZAP. So how do we do that? So what we do here is we say we want to go back to the ZAP again with the leading slash. We say resource assembly semicolon component is just a keyword slash myimage.jpg, and this is saying that we want to go back to that thing, reach into the assembly and find myimage.jpg. Let's press F5 and see what happens on that. And you can see we've picked up the bitmap that was embedded into assembly 2. So made a specific reference into that assembly inside the same ZAP that we are in. So we got one ZAP with two assemblies in it, and it allows us to build up, for instance, one assembly that contains all our resources and then just index into that from other assemblies. Might be a useful thing to be able to do. Okay, so we've seen that we can put resources inside assemblies, inside ZAPs, or just inside a ZAP, and we have syntax for referencing those different scenarios, and also that we fall back to the site of origin if we can't find the resource in the place that we initially expect to find it. Hopefully you get a flavour as to where you can put your resources inside of your Silverlight applications.